Thank you again. And what I'm going to do is to do a very quick overview of some of our experiences of doing intervention for really little kids, preschool age kids. And I'll start by saying something that I have touched upon before. Biology is not destiny. Biology is an important starting point, but destiny is more to do with a lot of experiences and what happens beyond. So in case of autism, biologically you are not wanting to interact, you would rather be left alone. That means that their experiences are also going to be limited, which means their outcome would be even worse off than the one on its own. And what we need to understand again is that because of the way they are wired or programmed, when parents initially try to engage them in activities, or some kids, as you would know, would naturally be going after things and absorbing everything around them as a sponge. They are like surgeons, I would say. You kind of see them, you do them, and you teach one. In a way, initially, earlier on, we don't even teach them much. They just absorb things around the environment. But when you have got a deficit which prevents you from participating in the social milieu of the environment, then you have got an inability to make use of the environment. So you gradually drift outside the social milieu loop. And despite trying initially, when they don't get the right response, they sometimes would drift away, or they would prefer to be left alone, and therefore parents would and caregivers would give them that opportunity to be alone. But our job is to get them involved, get them to participate in the social milieu of learning, and thereby make the circuitry to connect itself and make that development go in a much more neurotypical way. And we know that early intensive behavioral intervention would work for improving some of the symptoms. They are effective. And I'm going to touch upon the early start Denver model, which has been shown to be effective for improving the symptoms and including systematic review. It is a play-based program. It's a developmentally appropriate program for any kid, could be utilized for any kid. And really you are engaging them socially. Initial RCT was done using individual models of intervention. So 20 hours a week of therapist-child intervention. And there is data to show that significant gains in terms of the cognitive abilities, the adaptive skills, the visual processing, the language elements. And one thing about the early start Denver model is that it's a broad church. It has brought in elements from the Denver play-based appropriate developmental stimulation, also the pivotal response training and the relationship-based training, together with the applied behavioral analysis or the ABA principles, put together in one program. And there is also a parent module. So you can really empower parents to also participate in that intervention, and it's manualized. The target would be pretty much what we heard in the first talk, precursors of language, joint attention, imitation, intentional communication. If I'm pouring water from a jug and somebody gives the cup like this, that's an intentional communication, and I would pour. The person hasn't told me anything. So initially you are starting with pre-language skills and then taking it one step at a time. So sensory social routines, dyadic engagement, joint activity routines, triangles of attention, engaging them, let's pretend, and all the precursors of language, as I said, because we do have evidence that joint attention and those kind of things would predict better outcomes in terms of language. So again, under that three broad principles of treatment, you have the dyadic engagement, sensory social routines, verbal, non-verbal communication, etc. in the Denver model. And the rule is one word up. So if the child has no words at all, you would only say one word to the child at a time, no more. And if the child has got one word, you would use 2 words while you are engaging with the child. Similarly, the response that you get would be very much embedded in a relationship focus. That's the second arm of the intervention, taking turns, giving them choice, taking the lead of the child. And the ABA principles are the ones that you fall back on for learning per se. In Australia, in 2009, a Commonwealth government gave funding to establish centers of excellence, one in each state. And in New South Wales, we have that center. It's called the Autism-Specific Early Learning and Care Centers. It's really a long day care center where parents drop their kids for 8 hours when they go to work. That's available for any parent. And we were asked to put in an intervention for kids with autism within a long day care center, and that was the remit. And in Sydney and in Melbourne, we chose to use the Early Start Denver model because we thought that that's very behaviorally appropriate for that early childhood, because the program can start from 12 months to 60 months and even earlier than that. In our data, in the initial cohort of 26 and the later cohort of 49 children, we converted that individual intervention into a group delivery model. This is how it happens. There are large groups, something like 8 to 12 kids in a room, and therapists or the childcare workers who are really graduates with fidelity training on ESDM, very well trained, they would be in certain play stations, and the child would choose to go, which station they go to. And obviously, they would use a lot of creativity to get children engaged in the rotational aspect of the play. And we did find significant improvement in terms of including nonverbal using the Mullen scale. Vineland showed adaptive skills improvement, receptive language, expressive language, and decrease in the severity of autism. And this is the trick. When the child is developing, what we are trying to look at is, are we doing something above and beyond what typical development would take you to? So the red is the normal trajectory of kids developing, and when we caught the kids, that's a blue line, and in 10 months' time, 1 year of intervention, so 1 month on either side for the assessments, we were able to shift the developmental trajectory a little bit towards the neurotypical direction. And that's a big deal for kids with autism, because the farther out they go in age, the bigger the difference between the neurotypical. So we were able to show that it is helping over and beyond what the typical development or even a child with ASD was developing normally in the trajectory without the intervention. Now, our next biggest challenge was transitioning these kids into an educational setting, because these are preschools, long day care centers, kids that attend before they go to school. And one of the difficulties that we had was not so much the severity of the autism, but it's the behavioral difficulties that prevented them from learning in the classroom setting, that prevented them from integrating in and prevented the teachers from accepting them into the classroom. And again, we found that when we use some of the behavioral elements within the ESDM principles, we were able to show that it's a powerful tool, not only improving expressive receptive communication, but also in helping with the behavioral difficulties. So probably because the joint attention, the social interaction, and the turn-taking that they learn through the ESDM was also helping them to engage when they went to the mainstream school. I'll show you a video now, and I think I need a little bit of help from there.
Whee! Crash! Crash! Do you want the blue car? Here. Put your hand out and I'll give it to you. There you go. Here's the blue car.
Ignore and engage yourself in something enticing.
Like this. Up, 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 up,
Yep.
up, 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 up.
He'll come back.
Whee! Down it goes. Crash. Up, up, up again. Up, 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 up. Let go. It's going to go down. Ready? Here it goes. Boom. Down it goes. And up, 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 up. And ready for down? Ready for down. Here goes down. Whee! Crash. Crash. Are you ready? Up. Your turn. Up, 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 up. Yeah.
Good, Marie.
There we are. So this is the way of engaging the child. I don't know whether I'm going. Yeah, so after repeated trial and error, that turn-taking did eventually come come up. So you persevere and persist until you engage the child in sufficiently to get that response, and then you build on that. That's how it works. How does this intervention work at a biological neuronal circuitry level? Probably we are doing a lot in terms of that joint attention, getting the child to interact and act with you, jointly attend in something and turn take, etc. And also a lot of attention given to when even fractionally we give an attention to the eye region. Another thing that happens in autism is that they take information in a piecemeal way, not in the context of this is playtime, I have something here and she has got something to give to me in return and it's fun time. Instead, they just get stuck on one aspect of their behavior and only participate in the things that they need or they are interested in. And that's really a hallmark of the way in which autism works. If I walk into the woods, I would see the woods, but a kid with autism might walk into the woods and see one speck on one leaf on one branch of one tree. So that holistic experience is lost, and taking into consideration the context is lost. And part of what we are trying to do here is, through these interventions of modeling and behaviorally getting them to jointly activate things, you are helping them with the face processing, getting the attention to the eye region, cortical face specialization, emotional integration, social attention, so on and so forth. And we can show that using neurophysiological studies. For example, they are evoke response potential studies that show from the age of 18 months, 2 years, you are different when you look at mother in a picture versus cartoon figures. The activity would be pretty much same when you look at the cartoon figures for a kid with autism and a typically developing kid. But when you show a mother or somebody with an emotional significance, that when you see the difference. So in the ERP studies, N170 is usually larger to faces, prominent on the right hemisphere. But in autism, if you show an object, it's probably more activating for the brain than seeing a face. fMRI activation studies again shown a similar thing. The red is the fusiform face area, and you can see that on the control subject, there's the red activation for the face and the blue activation, which is for objects. But on the ASD, there's only the object area that's being activated. In early start Denver model studies from Mind Institute, Sally Rogers' team and Geraldine Dawson has shown that by comparing the EEG, ERP, and the spectral power before and after intervention in typically developing kids versus early start Denver model received kids and a group of kids who received treatment in the community. And what they were able to show was that when you present faces after intervention, the ESDM group and the typically developing kids showed a shorter NC latency, which is showing that social attention. So it's the attention-related ERP response. And again, they showed increased cortical activation when they were viewing faces as opposed to viewing objects. So clearly showing that we are doing something at the brain level, at the circuitry level. Now, the next question was, is there anything that we can do to enhance? And can we enhance the responsiveness to the social emotional cues? Can we enhance the face recognition, thereby improving the emotional engagement and improve social learning? While we heard, and I agree completely, that oxytocin is not going to be the panacea that is going to help us all, but based on the evidence from the oxytocin literature that might improve emotional responsiveness or social behaviors, we thought that maybe there is something in there. And we have now just started looking at the effect of oxytocin being given prior to engaging them in parent early start Denver model sessions. So we are looking at whether giving the oxytocin prior to the parent ESDM session might help improve the emotional engagement and social responsiveness. So we've just started the trial, and we are hoping that the oxytocin circuitry being linked to the dopaminergic reward, social reward circuitry might help also increase the kind of the kick that they get from doing those kind of activities, and also in addition to responding to their facial cue activation. We have just started a placebo versus oxytocin prior to 30 minutes prior to giving parent ESD. And by the way, in that video, it was a parent being coached to kind of do that activity. So we are doing a lot of engaging the community, and that's because we believe that, of course, with the prevalence rate of more than 1%, it's not sustainable that we are all going to cater for these kids in clinics. It's very expensive. 30 to 60,000 per year in Australian dollars is what it would cost to get private ABA type therapy. So we want to take it out into the community, disseminate it as widely as we can. As we said, we started with the long day care centers because government gave us the funding. The reasoning being, the earlier you're getting, the better the outcome. And we know that kids born with congenital cataract, if you don't do the cataract removal before 7 years of age, of course you remove the cataract they see, but the experience or what sense they make out of it would be considerably limited. So we want to really get in the preschool period. And again, the focus for early identification. If you have nothing to give to them, what's the point in identifying them? So we thought we needed to do something really drastic to get into the community, and that's precisely what we are doing. We are now training teachers and co-therapists and parents to go into preschools. This is a typical preschool, and there are kids with autism attending that particular preschool. So we go in there, and we will have at least one therapist trained up to fidelity, and the others would be continued to be coached to carry out the activity, including parents. We also provide it in the clinic setting if that's the preference for the parents, and we would also do it in the home setting if that's the preference for the parents, both in terms of parent training module being used or qualified fidelity-trained therapists going in. So in terms of the sustainability argument, I would say that any country, despite its economic wealth, would be constrained for manpower resources. Even when you have the money in the world, manpower is a bigger issue than what you might appreciate. So having opportunities for disseminating principles of a program into wherever the child goes. It could be the preschool, it could be the long day care center, it could be another place that they go to, like the church or the mosque or wherever. And we are doing a little study in India, because their mothers have, within local government areas or panchayats, have come together and created bud schools. They originally started it because kids with disability were finding it hard to integrate into the classrooms or attend a school. So they had to do something, and they came together and established bud schools. And it's there across the state of Kerala. And we are hoping to build on those bud schools and train the parents and also therapists on the principles of Early Start Denver model to cater for kids with autism at the community level. So in a way, that bud school doesn't stop at 18. That continues well into the adult life, or however long the young person or the adult would like to attend. That's how it's built up. So it's not only for preschool, also, although our emphasis on the intervention is starting with the preschool program. But that's another model that one may want to think about. Those kind of bud schools or the similar activity where people can come together into a place where there can be people upskilled or capacity building put into that, and some resources put into it in order to cater for across the spectrum. This is a hub and spoke model that we use. So the center of excellence, as we have as the SELC, is the seat where we would do the training activities, the capacity building activities, the research. But then we disseminate into the mainstream service staff, into regional areas. It's more into how do we help them to be inclusive and support them within those communities, because you don't have enough resources to make a separate center. Or we may have parent DSDM clinics where parents might come to get trained. Or we may have clinics delivering the ESDM, so that if that's the model the parents would like to take. E-clinics, we do the Skyping out, particularly in regional and remote areas. They can't travel to Sydney or Melbourne, and therefore we would Skype into a home and continue the training with the parents. And we definitely would take referrals from across the state, and there's one center in each state. In a way, I'm just contemplating whether we must be thinking about things at a population level rather than at a specialist hospital or a clinic level. While the clinic or the specialist hospital can be the hub, we do need to disseminate far and wide in order to really make an impact in the community. Thank you.